Thank you for joining Tech Tuesday number 38. Today we're going to talk about theories as a basis for strategy. First, we will take a moment of silence. We still have over 100 kidnapped people. So I read this paper. It's called Bringing a Message to the Strategy Madness. And it's definitely a strategy madness because everybody's talking about strategy and IP strategy, and it's completely confusing, and we don't even know what strategy is, and there's lots of definitions, and even when we have one, it's very difficult to communicate it. And what this paper by Jeffrey Meiser says, and I think it does, is it provides a simple framework which helps you create, analyze, and also assess strategy. And the way he does it, the basic idea, is that he uses a theory. In other words, in order to have a strategy, it has to be based on a theory of a challenge, a theory of success, and a theory of failure. And the word theory actually means a causal theory, which explains how item A leads to item B, leads to item C. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through his paper briefly, and I think it's worthwhile reading. It's not very long. And then I'm going to show how I'm applying that framework for IP. Now, IP is more complicated than his paper because you have multiple levels. We'll talk about it. You have multiple theories, and we'll talk about it. And you need to cover multiple options because IP is about possibilities. Okay, even when you have an IP strategy, in the end, what you're building is IP, which is supposed to work for 20 years to cover all sorts of options which might happen. And to make it all interesting, there's also a narrative. It's slightly different from narratives we've talked about before. And the question is, this is great, May, you want to give us a paper on strategy. What does this have to do with IP? And the answer is that the basic question of IP people is how do we use IP to help other people, to help business goals, and so on. And using these strategies is a very convenient way of identifying how you do that. Now, first I want to be clear, there's two basic types of IP strategy. One is how to use IP to help and as part of the business strategy. And the other one is what strategy do you use in order to meet your IP goals? Okay, we have an IP department, it has goals, and we might have a strategy for meeting them. And we're going to talk mainly and first off about using IP to support and inform business strategy. And the logic of what I'm going to be talking about is the following. If you can clearly formulate the business strategy, then you can identify leverage points where IP can make a difference. For some of these leverage points, we can provide useful IP, and not only IP in a positive sense, but also IP which dealing with risks and vulnerabilities. And I might touch on that in a teeny bit. And also IP can help us identify which strategies are more interesting, because if we have a strategy which IP can help, maybe it's more interesting. I don't know, at least for me. Why do we use theories as a defining heuristic for making sense of strategy? And a lot of the, I don't know, literature on strategy talks about your interests, your goals, your resources. And this theory starts out by talking about a challenge. It's saying, in the end, there's some sort of challenge, there's some sort of problem we want to solve. And let's analyze a strategy from that perspective. What are the problems we're trying to solve? Of course, you can definitely use IP and you can consider goals and so on, but we're not talking about that now. The series can be overly simplified as being causal explanation, but I want to remind you that there are other types of theories, some that are non-causal, and I give a link to one if you're interested. And in general, when you have something causal, it naturally turns into prescribing where you have opportunities. In other words, if A causes B, then changing A, changing the relationship between A and B are natural outcomes of that analysis. So these theories can be more easily analyzed. You can check to see that they're valid both internally and externally, as opposed to internally mean that they're coherent and externally mean that they have whatever effect it is you think they might be having. Also, you can stress test them because they're more formal. It's easier to check things about them. You can use them in simulation. If I know A causes B causes C, I can try different possibilities. And in general, there is a lot of literature, definitely scientific literature, talking about doing things with theories. I'm not suggesting we read it, I'm just saying it's a known entity. So what are these three basic theories which the paper talks about? The first one is a challenge. Okay, the problem we're trying to solve. And basically we have something, the root cause of the challenge, usually more than one. We have what it looks like, the proximate cause. We have the actual challenge, and I promise to give examples later. And the challenge has some negative effects. Now, already, when you look at this, you can say, where might people want to do R&D? Maybe they want to do R&D to overcome this root challenge. Maybe they want to block this negative effect. The minute we say where people are going to want to do R&D, as IP people, we can say, and here's where we're going to file a patent which will prevent them from doing R&D or using the results of R&D. So one of the places that you might not think about immediately, but if we talk about our competitor, we want to make his challenge greater. We don't want to just solve our problems, we want to cause problems for our competitor. But if you look at it from a theory of challenge, you can more easily identify these points. The second theory is a theory of success, which basically explains how we plan on responding to the challenge. And I want you to note that there's an intervention, something we're doing, the company, not the IP people. It will have some sort of effect on the challenge, and there's all sorts of effects you can have. It will result in improved conditions, and in particular, you will have certain positive effects that you want to have, or maybe changes, not necessarily positive. So I want to comment that this is not a vision for what the solution looks like. You need that too. This is rather an explanation which connects what the company is going to do, how it will affect the challenge, and why that will be the results that the company wants. And like before, each one of these steps has IP risks. For example, your intervention might not have freedom to operate. Positive effect number one might be infringing a patent. Positive effect number two, everybody wants to do it, you will get a patent protecting it, and I could go on. And of course, your intervention is more likely to succeed if you license a trade secret from somebody, which explains how to do it. In any case, I want you to know that the world is not linear. And I've shown a causal loop diagram. You have A affecting B, and it closes the loop, and so on. That's really what the world looks like. It's not as simple as I'm showing. And I'm suggesting that you use such a causal loop diagram to show the theory of how different parts affect other parts. Now, this theory of success he actually wrote about in a paper a decade ago. And you see a lot of people in the military talking about theory of victory. And I want to remind you that in IP, winning is nice, but success is even nicer. Okay, because when you have success and other people enjoying it, the entire world gets better. When you just have victory, you win. And when we talk about success and we talk about positive effects, you should always think about things that are measurable, SMART goals, M is measurable, or if you have an estimation, some sort of estimation you can measure. Why is it so important? Because we're building a theory and we have to explain how this intervention, which costs X, has a value positive effect 2, which has a value of Y, and that X is greater than Y. And if all you're doing is waving your hands, so we have a causal explanation, but we don't really have enough to help us decide what we should be doing. Last but not least, and what people like avoiding, is a theory of failure. Okay, so we have all of these plans, but these plans might fail. In particular, the intervention we do could fail for all sorts of reasons. One, it could make things worse. Two, it could work. Three, it could work, but not enough. And one of the reasons why you need a theory of failure is because when you have a strategy and you're applying it, you have to continuously monitor what you're doing and see if the strategy is being applied correctly and or if the strategy is wrong. So when we say failure, it's not just black and white, it's in general, how well are we doing? In the paper, he suggests that the biggest risk people have when building these theories is misunderstanding the causal effects. One of the solutions you can do to help make sure that you understand the effects is what's called a pre-mortem. Post-mortem, somebody dies and you check why they died. Pre-mortem is you pretend that you failed and you try to analyze how you got there. It's some sort of creative process that is done, but you need a theory of failure, otherwise it's not going to work as well. So let's remind again why we're going to talk about theory. When you have an organized process, it's more easy to make sure that you crossed all your T's and dotted all your I's. It helps you deal with the blank page syndrome. You don't know what to do. Theories are much easier for other people to check than just the end result. If you have to write a theory and explain how things interact and how they affect each other, you're less likely to apply self-deception, or maybe apply less. Everything I'm showing you now is not complete. Okay, it's not a complete way of building a strategy. I definitely didn't give you a lot of details that you need in order to build a strategy. But I think if you use this framework, you will definitely have a better strategy for the company and for IP. So let's talk about IP. So I'm just giving you an example that we can think about. I have a garden, I have fruit trees, and I also have our good friend Mediterranean fruit fly. That's this guy, and actually ma'am. And what the lady fruit fly does is she lays eggs in fruit in order for the babies to have something to eat. Unfortunately, babies like eating soft food, so she also injects bacteria, fungus, enzymes, I don't know what, but it causes the fruit to rot to make it easier for the maggots to eat. So not only do you have a hole in your fruit, but the whole fruit can rot quickly. So what do you do about it? Well, you can use poison. You can cover the tree with a net, and then the flies can't get in. The problem is that the poison is expensive and it runs out. And I care about Mediterranean fruit flies, but each tree has its own group of insects that like damaging. So I had this great idea. We would have a net, but the net would have inside small depressions filled with poison. Now, the tree attracts the flies walk around trying to get in, they find these depressions, they go in, they get poisoned, and they die. Okay? Great, wonderful idea. So now let's try to build a strategy. And we're going to start from the ground up, and we're going to talk about the strategy of a patent. Okay? Not the strategy of the company as a whole, but the strategy of the patent. So I'm going to write a patent, and this patent has a job to be done. Okay, I decided that what this patent is supposed to do is prevent other people from selling the net. And now I want to build a theory of success. And I have two possibilities. One is just say what success is, but another one is instead of talking about general success, to break down success into different dimensions, each one of which needs to have challenge, success, and failure. So, for example, patentability, that's one issue. Another one is protection. How does it do it? How does it do the job of preventing people from selling? Another one is infringement. How are people infringing? And the last one is enforcement. So I'm only going to talk about the first two. So it's a theory of the IP challenge for getting the patent. And the challenge is that there are many nets out there, and putting nets on a poison on nets is well known, like for mosquito netting. And when you put it on a bed and the bed has rounded corners, sorry, ChatGPT was unwilling to draw it that way, you have spheroid depressions with poison in it. Okay, that's a challenge that I have regarding patentability. What is my theory for why I'm going to succeed? First, it's novel, and there's a synergy between the depressions and the poison being only in the depression, which saves money on poison, sorry, and also reduces the poisoning risk. So my theory of success is that because I'm going to make this argument, I'm going to get a patent. And now there's a theory of failure. Here's a few theories, actually. One, the claim wording might not distinguish the inadvertent shaping of a net. Another one, the examiner might say that non-uniform application of poison, or that you have uniform application but it rubs off, is inherent. Okay? So instead of looking at the company, we're looking just at the patent, and instead of looking everything about the patent, we're looking only at patentability. And here's my theory of the challenge, success, and failure for getting that patent. In a similar way, protection or use. So I already decided that I'm going to use Gardenia. They changed their name, and I misspelled the name apparently too. Uh, Too late for that. And I want to use them as a distributor. Now, my challenge is they might decide that my incredible genius net is just another cool garden thing. And you charge for it like a cool garden thing instead of like the greatest invention since sliced bread. So that's my challenge. My theory of success, and feel free to say it's misguided, is that I'm going to show that we save on spraying and we reduce insect infestation, and it's going to sell so well, and therefore it's going to turn into a premium product with a premium price. And but we also have a theory of failure. Okay, Gardenia is a price controlled product category, so once you get in, there is no premium, there's no choice. And another theory of failure, they might push a competing product, which is not as good but has their brand behind it, and that will make my product even more commodity. So I just want to look at this last part. This is actually goes beyond the patent and more into the business case for the company. I think you can see what type of IP I would want to file in order to prevent Gardenia from doing this. Let's take a break for a second. I keep on talking about theories, and you must be asking yourself, what is inside the theory? So first of all, even if you don't have anything at all, the very fact that you have a theory which connects A, B, and C together is a great step forward. But the basic part of the theory is some sort of causal model that links activities and context to results. Like I said, A causes B causes C. It is probably probabilistic because the world is probabilistic. If you're capable of giving a formula or a graph or simulation, then you're way ahead of the pack. Usually you just have words. The theory includes in it facts. You can use estimates, but then, it's less reliable. And you definitely have a lot of assumptions, so you should point them out. I'm assuming that they have a product category. Maybe they don't. And there's some sort of story, the events happening. And the theory has to talk about these events and also something to do with the vision of where the story is supposed to end up. I said before, we want to be measurable so that we can compare different alternatives. And like everything else that you're tracking in project management, having milestones is really important because that ties together your story and your score and prevents you from saying, oh, it's nearly done, it's nearly done. Let's talk about narrative. You think about a company or about a patent, there's always a journey. You start here, and at some point you get over there. So there's really two issues. One, how do we get there? How do you get from point A to point B? And the second one is, once we get to point B, how do we stay there? When you talk about a real life company, you usually have multiple stages. First, you have to get seed investment. Then you have to have proof of concept. Then you have to get round A. Then you have to get clients. Okay, there's a whole journey. And at each stage of the journey, you're going to have different theories. One of the reasons you're going to have different theories is because the IP has different things to do at each stage of the process. You need an application to get seed money, but perhaps you need a granted patent in order to do a licensing agreement. And like I said before, there's always options and possibilities, and we want theories for what's on either side of it. Last but not least, you have events. Things happen. Suddenly, the FDA comes out with some ruling about nets and poison in home gardens. So are you ready for it? Can IP help you be ready? I don't know. I started with the level of patents, and patents is a basic level when we talk about IP, but a higher level is engagement. And the reason why that's important, because the strategy for getting a patent, only IP people care about. I think most of you have met that situation already. You explain to a client how he's going to get a patent, and the eyes glaze over. So let's start talking about business goals. I have a business goal such as an interaction, a cooperation with another company. I have another business goal. I want to block a competitor. I have another business goal. Something might happen. I want IP to use in case that happens, and there might be, some time window here. So assume we have a competitor called Netball, and they sell a kit which has a fruit net, and it has these little sticky balls which are colored bright yellow, and the fruit flies come to them and stick to them. Okay? So as from a business perspective, I have a business goal of preventing them from competing with me, or at least making sure that I have a big competitive advantage. So a theory of success would be that my patent prevents integrating the net and balls for easy installation, and because my product is integral, I'm going to sell more. Okay? Challenge is that they might sell balls with dual-use hooks. It's a challenge for IP, because if it's dual-use hooks, it can be hung on the net or hung on the tree. They can say they have a non-infringing use, and therefore they're okay. And I also have a theory of failure. It could be that the advantage of having an integral single product is insignificant to the client. So even though my patent prevents Netball from doing that, from a business perspective, my patent that I got doesn't have the desired business results. Okay, it turns out you can do easy installation without having integrated. Okay, it's quite common that we write a patent covering the wrong thing. This framework of theory of success allows you to define what is the right thing and what is the wrong thing. Let's go one level up. Okay, I have a company. The overall company strategy, that's what we want to support with IP. So the company should have multiple sets of theories, each for one of the things that the company wants to do. And for each one of these theories, we can ask, how can IP help you do it? So here's just an example. The company might have a theory about how it achieves money flow, cash flow, but also actual income. A different theory about how the company will grow. And yet another theory about how the company will stay alive when competitors arrive. Okay, so it's like three different theories that the company at the company level has to have. And each one of these theories is causal and probably can be drawn using a causal loop diagram. And for each one of them, I ask, where can I apply IP and can IP help it happen? Now, one of the things that I like about having these theories is that I believe, and I hope to prove, that it's easy to ask a business person, first of all, to confirm or deny a theory, because I'm coming to him in his language. I'm saying, okay, this is how you're telling me that you're going to get the company to grow. Okay, and it's not IP language, it's business model language. And he can confirm or deny, and he can say how important it is. And I can ask him, if I interfere with this particular part of the competitor, or if I help you keep your flywheel turning, for those who use flywheels, will it help you? And this is language which hopefully the manager can easily answer. And then I tell the manager, and the way we'll do it is 3 patents, 2 FTOs, and 1 trade secret, to which the manager will tell me how much is it going to cost. Okay? Now, there are other things which as IP people, we want to have theories about. One of them is competitors, okay? Since IP is used to cause trouble for competitors. So if we understand what the competitor is doing, what success means to them, what the challenges are, then we can better formulate IP, which explains how we're going to interfere with them. If you are capable of changing the entire ecosystem, you need to have a theory for how that's going to happen. And just to give you an example of not the entire ecosystem, but just a small part of the ecosystem, imagine you're General Motors and you have a challenge that there might be lithium shortage. Now, General Motors arguably doesn't buy lithium, doesn't sell lithium. But in the ecosystem, we understand that if the price of lithium goes up, the price of batteries will go up, and the competitors might make batteries that are not based on lithium, in which case GM is going to be at a disadvantage. So presumably in the boardroom somewhere, or some other meeting room in GM, a few smart people are sitting around and trying to figure out what they're going to do if this lithium shortage gets worse. And what we want to do is help the IP people join in on that conversation. The government, I'm not going to say any more about it, except to note that when the government fails, it's bad. But if you have a theory in place for how the government might fail, and you're prepared for it, that's great. And if, as an IP person, you know what to do about it, you can provide IP that helps to deal with it, that's wonderful. And customers. So mostly I talked about strategies of success or strategy of the company. But let's talk for a second about strategy, IP strategy. Okay, I'm the IP department. I want to build an IP strategy, whatever that means. So here's a framework, a 6-part framework. Part 1, you need to identify which goals IP can help. And definitely we can use all of this theory stuff in order to see where IP can help. You want to identify places where IP can cause problems. I'm talking about for us, things like FTO. So definitely we talked about theories of failure that can help you figure out where you might fail. You have a goal of IP being part of the business strategy, for example, licensing. And again, when you talk about theory of success, you can build a theory which explains it. The relative importance of IP, different parts of the IP in order to justify budget. So using theories, and the more causal and more numerical they are, the better you can judge how effective IP will be versus how effective other things will be. The structure of your business might depend on IP, and if you have a theory for what it means for the company to be successful and how it will be successful, that suggests the structure. And of course, the IP habits. One of the habits that we talk about is how to avoid all of these different theories of failure, and also specific theories for how you obtain IP, how you keep IP, and so on. You might be asking, Meier, where do these theories come from? And the answer is the same place that your strategy comes from. Okay, that's not what I'm trying to do today. All I'm trying to do is give you a structure which can help you flesh out the strategy. And when you do that, here's a few questions that, clients don't often ask, and if they do, we might wave them away. For example, how much effect will IP have on the success of the company? That's a great question. Now we can get closer to answering it. Is the IP aligned with what might make a difference in achieving goals? Now we know how to answer that question. Are we addressing all of the important issues? Well, if we have the series of success and failure and challenge arranged properly? Yes. I don't know if you noticed, but I talked about IP and I talked about the business. But guess what? All of the company units have success, failure, and challenges. Just for example, R&D, marketing, and sales. And of course, for each one of these departments, we can ask, how can IP help us do whatever it is we want to do? So for example, for R&D, we might talk about licensing trade secrets so we can do R&D faster, doing FTOs in order to prevent us from doing a redo in R&D. You know, you do R&D, oops, it's infringing, let's do it again. In marketing, obviously, trademarks. In sales, part of your sale process, especially in freemium products, is the onboarding. So if we have a patent on the way you do onboarding, that helps us with sales. So for each one of these departments, we can identify their challenges, and you can use causal series to link specific IP to specific value. And just to say it again, these series, because they're not just one word, but actually a logical analysis, they're easier to analyze than just goals. Now, here's a table, and of course you want to make a much bigger table, but imagine that you have one of these for each company unit, and what I'm showing you here is different stages. After 1 year, your first trade show, when you're getting round B, your first sale, your first competitor. At each one of these things, you have multiple visions or goals, and you probably have more than one challenge, more than one series of success, and definitely more than one series of failure. And only after you fill in all of this do we ask, and where does IP fit in here? How will the IP help us overcome the challenge and so on? And at the same time, we can now go one level down and talk about series for the IP itself. So we have a vision to be the only one selling these nets with poison. And we talked about the challenges we might have with that. And we're going to get a patent. And then we talked about the series, which talk about whether this patent will actually be able to do what it's supposed to do. To summarize, series are causal tellings of how something is supposed to look like when it works and how it works, what challenges it overcomes, and how it might fail. You probably need more than one of these sets. You use it in order to become more rigorous. You use it for communication between IP people and people that are not IP people. And if you ask how many series are you going to make tomorrow morning, the answer is I have no idea. Okay? It's a tool. Here's an example. I have a company called Electrobike, and they make electrical bicycles, or electric bicycles, that fold down to the size of a suitcase. I'm sure you've seen them. And the reason why I want them to fold down is in order to put them on the train. Now, I was just recently in a subway system in some European city, and I spent about half the time walking between stations underground. So it would have been nice to ride my suitcase. Now, you're not allowed to ride electrical bicycles, but sitting on a suitcase might be okay. So Electrobike modified the design, which allows the bicycle to be ridden even while it's folded down. So what you have to ask yourself, okay, and it's on two levels. Level number one, what is the series of success, challenge, and failure for this invention? And level number two, which is perhaps more interesting and perhaps should come first, is if we think about Electrobike as a company, what we're really asking is, why is Electrobike going to succeed as a company? And the answer in the theory of success should definitely include something to do with this invention. Otherwise, why are we spending money on it? Okay, thank you. I am stopping the recording. Recording